Welcome to Co-working Out Loud, where we explore the deeper side of co-working, content, and community. I'm your host, Kat Johnson. Hey friends, so what you're about to hear is an accidental podcast episode. I jumped on a Zoom call with my new friend, Corrales Cachola, to talk about Web3, what it means for community, if co-working should be paying attention to this, and all the other things. And somewhere an hour plus deep into our conversation, we realized that we should have been recording this. And it turns out that Corey was. So we edited it. And here are the high points of our conversation. I think there's a lot to think about here in terms of the future of micro communities, micro commerce, some interesting things you can offer members. So here we go. I've been lurking around the blockchain NFTs for a while, just kind of watching it happen. And during the Bored Ape Yacht Club kind of craze, I was like, this doesn't feel like it. But then I know other people are like, this is the future. This is what we're doing. I don't know what to think. So I'm super curious to hear your work and more about you and all that.
Yeah, no, it's, I think, when I see your stuff, I'm just like, these are the people that need to be in it right now. Cause that's part of the big problem I've noticed is a lot of the talented, especially community builders are not in the space because people see kind of the surface level of all this weird stuff going on with a lot of those projects. And it's I think it's been hard for community, people that are deep in the community to think that that's something worth investing in.
This is one of the things I struggle with because I'm the eternal optimist, and it feels like anything that's handed over to humans, we're just going to fuck it up. Scams, greed, money. It's people figure out how they can game it and play it. And it's conceptually, I'm yes, and I'm skeptical. Will we ever pull off a complete transformation of how we do things? Get from this huge power imbalance. I don't know. It's interesting, but the piece that seems cool to me is little micro communities. I'm a part of a bunch of different communities. All very meaningful and one of them, I'm in recovery, and one of the recovery things is we're self-supporting, right? So we don't deal with a whole bunch of decision makers and a whole bunch of hierarchy and money and this and that. We just figure it out and then we're good.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that attracts me the most is it's a decentralized movement. That's a really big point that I don't think enough people quite understand, how significant that is for the future of communities. You talk about it I think in Web 2 of these and it's being done. It's not even Facebook groups are essentially decentralized.
Right.
You can argue that. And that's already happening. It's been happening. But I think the big difference is that the things that power a crypto community is the crypto part. And this is the emergence of, economics. So when you connect the community with the token or the NFT, you now have essentially mini economies you have the possibility of them. It's not like they're, it's just, that's what is happening. That's why so many people are getting into Web3 is because this is a whole, what I call human economics. It's a whole new understanding of how we apply economic models onto, using art and in a community. I think it's our own value system, right? That's the powerful thing to me. That's really incredible, just to strive for it, even to me is worth it.
I think so too. And it's interesting to see the evolution. Like years ago, my primary gig was writing for Shareable, which is a publication about the sharing economy. So like early days where Airbnb was still considered sharing economy and stuff. Yeah. Then also, so like big projects like that, and like tool libraries and just a lot of things like that. But, on a smaller level, like community dollars or downtown dollars or something where we decide the value, we decide how they're exchanged and how you can use them. And then off we go. Or like time banks. It's another similar thing. Like you and I exchange an hour for an hour. Yeah. So it's like, this just feels like moving into a system that's easier to kind of track and maintain. It seems like once it's up and running, then you have this built-in thing. And Yeah,
and the other big activation is, and I think we're not seeing it yet because the Web3 is just so new, and it's frankly, it's mostly, that's why you see so much of I think a lot of the, kind of toxicity, I guess you could say, right away, is because most of it is American-based brand. It's a lot of old legacy, what I call legacy brands, that are coming in, and that's just, I think that's just inevitable. It's the way things work. But eventually, because of the nature of crypto, it's borderless. So if you look at it that way, the activations globally, when you can connect, a community that you're building in the U.S., I guess you could say, but I mean, sure, it's global. I mean, you could say like everyone can come in, but there's a big difference when it's like a community in like, Nigeria that, let's say you share this vision. And so in the old way, you would have to like, form partnerships and there's a longer lead up to like, there's a lot of like barriers. And then there's a money problem in terms of like currencies going back and forth to do things. Now that can be done, but you have to go through a lot of gatekeepers, like even PayPal, or these things can be done, but they are gatekeeper kind of currencies that, or financial systems that don't allow you to create a fluid economy between the two. And crypto is just fluidly going back and forth. Right. There's no friction points. There's no everyone, and the other powerful thing is like in like places like Africa, you don't need a bank account. So there's a lot of unbanked people that you can start building communities and financializing them immediately. So this is like, that kind of blows my mind because I'm in kind of bank. The other stuff that I do is bank marketing, community bank marketing, and, financial inclusion has always been like something I've always dreamed of that, but it's just really hard to connect the dots with, especially like American banks they don't typically even care about true financial inclusion anyway. Right. So crypto is sort of like this, I see it as like a bridge to do it and a way to actually force the banks to do better, because if they don't, crypto can unlock global mayhem on the banks. And it's sort of that's sort of the game you have to play. It's a forced, like you better play ball or, it's fine if you don't want to take part, but we've got, the more this movement grows, the bigger, the activations in Nigeria alone, this is going to be the third largest country in the world in 30 years. And they have one of the highest crypto, like, awareness of anywhere in the world. Wow. So that's just in Nigeria. That's not even the rest of Africa.
Yeah.
Right? And then you've got Latin America. You've got, India, the people that are not even counted in TAM and all this stuff. We don't even know. Like we have no idea how big these markets are even, because they're not banked.
So like in Nigeria, I feel like so much of it's conceptual to me. It's like, what does it look like on a day to day? So like, people have crypto in Nigeria. And so like if you and I were exchanging services or something, we would just do it that way. Is that the thing just for like day-to-day transactions? It's not so much like an investment vehicle, which is what it feels like to me. And like that crazy, remember like 6 months or a year ago where I was just like, everyone is going crazy and NFTs, people were like, just making a circle on a page and selling it for $200,000. I'm like, what's going on? But like on a day-to-day level, what is that?
Yeah, those can be totally done. I mean, there was a community manager that I hired in Nigeria for, just a short time, just a trial thing. And it was she just gave me her Ethereum address, which is just this thing, and you can transfer that publicly. It's not like a thing that's you have to secure. And unless someone wants to send her money. So she just sends that to me on, text, and then boom, like she's got it in 3 seconds, like no, like there's no like anything in between that. The danger, of course, is that it is people to people. So you can get, right? Like someone could walk up, like there's no intermediary. No, there's no like what we call trusted something to mediate anything. But, I think the deeper you get into the philosophy and theory behind how the movement started, it's like, that's kind of a sham. It's just a big story that we've all been told. Like, there's these trusted sources that help mediate. I mean, good luck with, banks have always taken that role. Like they are, the trusted source, but look at the problems with everything from racism to, you name it. Like, how can that be a trusted source of, like, you're putting a lot of trust in systems that have never really cared about a lot of people trust. They care about like shareholder trust, maybe.
It's like we treat banks like part of the infrastructure, but they're a business. Like I was talking to a banking marketer not long ago. He came to do a little presentation and was talking about they introduced a new card and anyway, the short story was if people don't go into debt, they don't get a return on the investment. So it's not worth it to them to do something that is more of like a service kind of product because there's no or little return. So they're just like, we're not going to do that. It's a business, even though it's like, it's like part of the infrastructure.
Yeah. And then the other problem is that the banks are also, they run by borders, according to borders. So this is not fair on just an equality level, inclusion level, because like an American bank, they're bound by all kinds of FDIC rules and regulations. So they can't even if they wanted to go and help out across borders, they can't do it. And so now they're hampered by a lot of the legal things, which are totally ridiculous at this point. They're so antiquated and they're built for, frankly, the way I look at it, it's like it was built for a white guy's world and an American one at that. So people that are in crypto that are deep in it, they already know there's no way this system is going to maintain it as diversity and borders become more fluid. They're already becoming more fluid with the internet, like paying people from across the borders. Like it's already doing that.
It's already happening. The front runners are like, it's here.
It's not a sustainable model. It's sort of just, I think we're at a point where we're still, I guess what you'd call, who's this community builder? Her name is Priya.
Priya Parker.
Priya Parker. Yeah. And she said, she has this great, you probably know it, like from her book. And she says something about the, like outdated rituals that she uses like marriage for a really interesting example that like marriage in India that is, and she's, part Indian. So a lot of the ritualization around marriage, even though it's outdated, still applies, and it drives a lot of the values that Indians kind of like still hold on to, but they're not valid anymore. So it's like these old ritualizations that they actually get the young people don't even care about them.
Right.
And so it's kind of like that, where I feel like a lot of this stuff is just ritualizing because people don't want to upset the apple cart.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's just the way it is. And I know there's like, not everyone is going to be so like risk taking like that, but I just think like in terms of when you start looking at diversity and like people that I am traveling with in the Web3 space now that are in diversity, there's an urgency to this stuff. You know, the more you ask permission from people that typically shut you out anyway, what good is this going to do you? You know, so they're starting to, I think they're starting to understand like they have to really take control of that narrative and shape it how they want.
I mean, it feels like that's what this whole thing is. Like, it's like, what is it? It's like whatever we make it. It could be a disaster or it could be amazing.
Right. If you just look at it from the outside, you're never going to find the talent that you want because you're the talent. Come on in and just start building.
Oh my God. That's such a great quote. I got to write that down.
Just come on in.
Oh, I love it.
You know, and I guess I would say, like, when I look at your stuff, I'm just like, this is where the talent is. This is the talent that's missing. And it's the reason. I know it's the reason why there's so many bad, mediocre to simply inept people that are in the space, because the first ones that get in are the really technologist people, and they're speaking at some other level, like, you know, on technology.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not even relatable. Like, some of the stuff is just like, what are you talking about? That doesn't even resonate with anyone except your buddies, you know, over beers. It's so esoteric. It doesn't even like it. And why is that important even? Like, what blockchain are we using? I mean, these are important things, like structurally and planning. But that's not a roadmap, for instance. A lot of the people in NFTs think a roadmap is this thing you put out all of your plans that may or may not happen. And it's very structured, like in Q2 of 2024, we're going to have an event, and this is supposed to help investors, what they call them, help them understand that you're in the game, you're good. And it's just like, no, like that's an internal roadmap, but an external one is like a storytelling thing. It's like marketing.
Yes.
You need to bring people into the story, you know, the Steve Jobs way, or the old advertisers that would just like kind of sell a dream, because, you know, you've got to sell that big dream before you get them on board with all these like crazy kind of like plans that you've got going on.
That's just what I was thinking, that the storytelling around all of this is horrendous. There's a huge divide between people in the space and the mainstream, because no one has a clue what you're talking about. And it's like, there's so many different things like Web3, crypto, coins, NFTs. What is like no one's clear what it is. And I think Nigeria is an interesting example, because there was a need that this solved. They're like, cool, we're down, we're doing this. So now there's like that much more understanding of it. But until there's mainstream need, or it hits that, you know, the threshold where, I don't know, something needs to shift, because it's confusing and easy to disregard right now.
Yeah, and I mean, in my opinion, it won't be easy to disregard. It'll be harder and harder because there's so many, like, I guess you'd call them like tremors, or, you know, signs and signals that are coming from all over the place now that point to that old world is falling down, of this old economic model, which is especially like companies. I think COVID was a big driver too. I don't think it's a mistake that COVID comes and Bitcoin just skyrockets during that time, like absolutely unbelievable. NFTs, all that stuff. I don't think that was a mistake. I think it was a very clear indication that COVID had basically cut the entire global supply chain.
Yeah.
Like, Zoom became the supply chain and information supply chain. That's what happened almost overnight. But it wasn't really overnight. It was just that we all have the tools now to do it. They were there, ready, and it was already falling, but COVID just advanced it by who knows how many years, right? Maybe decades. And I think that's a really big, like, black swan that I think just it created this massive inflow to, like, crypto finally coming to light that we can't really rely on, and then the global financial meltdown, in 2008, because that's what led to the Bitcoin white paper being released.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that came from literally the ashes of that.
Wow.
It came, like, it was already being conceptualized, and then in early 2009, the Bitcoin white paper just appears somewhere and just boom, and all of a sudden it's like catches fire, and the early, community was just all over it as a, alternative form of currency, and, getting away from, centralized finance and all this stuff. Yeah. I always say, like, if you want to talk about community, there's nothing more clear as to how powerful community was that basically built the entire narrative of Bitcoin. That early community they were, almost to the point of, some of them were, like, kind of toxic. They're so maxed out on Bitcoin is going to smash the systems and all that. So pretty powerful stuff. But it really was community and storytelling that, because no one could, right? Like, who could wrap their head around it at that point? Like, what are you even saying? Like, you're talking nonsense,
Wow. Wow. Coming back to community and storytelling, that's why I like beat the drum of community just unceasingly, because like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, co-working was like this movement of people where I would, like, flip up a folding table someplace that had Wi-Fi and work together. And then, like, more and more and more adoption. And now it's just like this massive global industry with huge money, huge players, huge, like, fabulous spaces with chandeliers and, which to be honest, I've never been part of the polarity of, like, it's either community or this thing. It's like, the way I see it, like, it's facilitating this whole flexible future of work, which I'm here for it. But the thing I'm concerned about is, like, so many spaces are opening. It's like doubling. Like, a year or so ago, the estimate was there are 20,000 spaces in the world. And now I just heard the estimate is 40,000. So it's like, oh my God, we just doubled in, like, a short time. So my concern is that spaces are opening without an understanding of, like, it's not office rental. Like, for me, it's like, it's the deeper thing. It's the something more. It's the getting the humans together. It's the collaborative thing. And some spaces are hyper focused on that. Some of them are just kind of like, oh, we're just going to do happy hours. But I think people are getting it. And it's not just like touchy feely. The way I see it from a member perspective, it's like going into an unactivated space, going into, like, an office rental, like the executive suites of old, is like a total snooze fest, right? There's nothing worse than sitting by yourself, working alone in a sterile space. So, it's like a cry to people, like, you got to do this or you're not going to make it. Like, this is what people want. Everything has changed. Everything has changed. People want to know what you're about. They want to know what your community is. Like, it's not going to be enough just to split up office space. It's just not. Right.
Yeah, I have a friend in LA, and he's also in, Web3 and crypto stuff, and he kind of acts as a CMO, fractionalized CMO to a lot of these new emerging Web3 companies. And one of his clients is they're a community in LA that's sort of like a creator. They're like a mixture of, like, a creator incubator and an Airbnb. So like almost like a youth hostel model.
That's cool. Yeah, like a co-living kind of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He's telling me about it, cool. And he's trying to connect a Web3 solution to it so that they can have like, well, first of all, like Web3 education, so that it acts as more of a pathway for them to actually get jobs in Web3 and all this new economy of Web3. So they come to these kind of creator youth hostel places, and then they kind of like set up shop there, and for like, you know, as long as they want. I thought it was really interesting, and I don't know if you're like, what is your interest in the like, are those kind of your future models of like what that stuff is? Because I feel like it's definitely more lifestyle. There's a certain philosophy to it, more than just like, if I just go and rent space at WeWork or something, you know.
I actually think about this a lot because when I was writing at Shareable, I wrote a ton about co-housing and co-living and things like that. I definitely feel like it's the future. Even to be able to travel, like I would love to go to London and not just pay for a hotel or an Airbnb for a month, you know, like a longer stay. Yeah. If I could plop into a already existing community that had a space and a place for me to stay. Yeah. I definitely think that's the future. I have some concerns that it's like hyper youth oriented right now, like the digital nomad. I'd love to see it expand a little bit. Like for me, I'd love to be part of a community, but I also want a space for me and my partner to go chill out and not just be like dorm style.
Yeah.
I think we'll get there because people don't I think we'll get there.
Yeah. It seemed to me like something definitely like targeted for really young folks. But then I thought, you know, I mean, in decentralization, in my view anyway, like that's how it should be. You should have these very ultra niche places, and the more of those you design and then hopefully connect together somehow, the ones that have common vision, then I think that's the goal, you know, in my view, of like interconnected communities or something like that.
Yeah, same. And then the more clear spaces, whether a co-living kind of thing or a co-working space, the more clear they are about who they are and sharing that, it lets people select which one is right for them, because a space might be amazing for you. It might be not the right fit for me, and vice versa. But it's like having that choice, and like, if I'm going for a writing retreat, I might want one particular kind of space. If I'm going to meet with 10 friends, we want something different. But just like, I just feel like it's all about flexibility, freedom, connection, being able to drop into things instead of, like going to a new area and just kind of plopping down by yourself. And sometimes that's fun to just wander around, but it's really cool to drop into a co-working scene and have events and programming and people who are open to conversations.
What do you think happened with like the WeWork model? That I think, you know, there was a lot of stuff that I was impressed with when I was with them. Like they were trying out this rental thing in New York City where if you were a member, you could rent out this really cool, like, apartment for your family. And, you know, I was like, damn, that's really cool. But then it, you know, all that stuff with their CEO went down, and suddenly all those things, and then COVID came. Was that just a bad timing on their part, or just the CEO was just bad, but their ideas were good, or like a mixture?
I don't know enough I'll give you the perspective from like being a co-working insider. I don't know, like inside WeWork, like I didn't follow it closely enough to know like all the moving parts. But the thing that was frustrating initially is co-working had already existed for years, and then WeWork came about and they're like, hey, here's this cool thing called co-working, and everyone's like, what the hell? Like we're already doing this. And then the thing where they really did not become part of the co-working community is they would do this predatory marketing where they'd like park trucks outside of existing co-working spaces.
Oh, wow.
Some of them just like a solo owner operator. And they'd go park out front and be like, we'll give you 3 months free. or they did just these unscalable offers, right? These are unsustainable. So then it became like this total tension about, WeWork, somebody called it the Voldemort of, like, and, then I think now watching that whole crazy arc, the net, I think it's a net positive because they brought so much awareness to what co-working is and got people to think outside of kind of existing real estate models, opened it up for entrepreneurs, startups. A friend said the other day, she's like, it's rare to even find a co-working space with a keg and a pool table or whatever anymore. It's like, that was like this first on the scene. It brought a ton of attention. They sucked up all the press attention in the room for like, I don't know, 6 years or something. Yeah. And then, now they're just kind of part of this ecosystem. There are a lot of big brands. There are a lot of big funded companies, and there are way more. I think the split we've actually been talking about this recently, that within co-working, it's somewhere between 60 to 85% are independent spaces. So like the big brands like Industrious, WeWork, they take up a lot of the oxygen, but, far more are the independent spaces, which I want to make sure those guys are all good,
Yeah, I know. I mean, haven't been in one since when COVID, I canceled my contract with WeWork, but I know like I'm in Portland, Oregon, and there were so many cool models that were coming in, like really deep artist, spaces that were, the really cool artists would just they just had these great spaces in these like areas of town that were like, sought after, but not, they weren't expensive, but they weren't in the best areas, but they were clearly like building up a lot of cred in those areas to be desirable for the artist communities. And it was definitely like co-working was that thing that was doing it. But I don't know what's going on like around town now, since I just think that COVID just changed so many things in town. It just like the WeWork that I was at just completely left. They abandoned ship, and it was a really cool building that they had. And so it's it's a shame that they pulled out. But that's just the way it goes, I guess.
I know, it was a crazy time. I think though it like recalibrated us as humans. And like you were talking about, it accelerated Web3 and all the blockchain stuff. It did the same thing for co-working, because the remote model, suddenly this thing that was like, some companies are like tinkering around with remote, all of a sudden is like, and we're all remote. And, now the conversation is, who's forcing people back? Who's going fully remote? Who's doing 2 days? Like, it's just endless about, who's doing it well, who's not doing it well. We're just in this like transformational time that co-working's positioned really, really nicely, that, people who had to work from home for a couple of years and are just over it, or, companies have given up their offices because no one could go in, so they just gave them up. And now they're like, we can go into this place with a short lease and flexible terms. And like co-working came out of this in a really good place.
I liked, there was one thing that the local one that I was part of, I think it was mostly, it just goes to show the power of like one person in the organization that was moving all kinds of stuff that you didn't know. That was because they were independent. A lot of them were independent. So the one that I was at, they didn't do this stuff over at, the one down, a couple blocks away even. But this one kind of woman at that, she was like I don't know, she must have been some sort of manager there, but she was doing cool stuff like partnering with, they did a partnership with the city, and they brought in this like, it was like the refugee job placement thing that the city was doing. And then, so they brought in all these like refugees to train them. I don't think they trained them. I think the city were training them or vetting them. And then WeWork brought them into work as, doing staffing and stuff like that. Like, and then they would, it was kind of cool. Like they would put their story on like the elevators, like they would have their names and their picture. and their backstory of like what country they were from. And
love it.
And it was cool. Like you would get to know people, and like I ended up talking to a number of them just because I saw, oh, they're putting their story, just a little snippet, so then I knew what to talk to them about when I'm at, getting my drink. And then we struck up a conversation, and like it was pretty powerful. Like it was just because I think they just were good at the storytelling part of and welcoming people to go, you can, we want you to interact with people. That's the point of this thing.
It's like I talk and think about this all the time. There's this like invisible wall where people are desperate for connection, but we have like this buffer. And if you do the tiniest thing, like putting a blurb about someone in the elevator, suddenly it like vanishes that. And you're like, oh, that's so-and-so. There's like some context. It's like an invitation. Like, it just sets a tone, right? Like you're not here alone.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the most essential thing. Like you're not in a doom vacuum of isolation. Like we're here together.
Yeah, I think that's the whole, it's the key. I think it happened with me, it happened during the pandemic, just like a lot of people. Like I went into Clubhouse, like when the Clubhouse came out, that was my community. Like that became,
me too.
I found, some of the people I met, like, even though most of them I don't talk to today, but I'll never forget them. And I think that's a powerful, it's not just a fluke or it was some app that just popped up, and it just depends on how you treat it. Like to me, I began to like connect with people on deeper levels, and then I started running rooms, and I would tell people, let's just for a second like reframe and go, we're not like looking at the phone in our app, we're inside of it together.
Totally.
And that just like totally, that sort of like metaphor is like, boom, they instantly would be like, the conversation changed. Everything changed when you just said this one little thing.
And didn't it felt like that, like the best rooms, it really felt like that. I leaned hard on like social audio. Sometimes I would put stuff on, it's like 10 o'clock at night, just like listening to whatever, not even, just being part of something. There was one, some collective that would do, it was like storytelling, but like each person would take it a little bit further. So they were creating something.
Oh, that's great.
It gave me chills right now. Like it was just awesome. Like we're here, we're okay. Like we're still creating and stuff. And remember, like D Nice was spinning. I think he might have was he in New York or something? But like he'd get on Instagram live every day and play music for hours. I'm like, oh, I guess it's time for D Nice.
Those were wild. I mean, honestly, I don't think I'll ever see that again. I mean, it was just there were so many things in there, especially if you were early. And I thought, you kind of take it for granted, like, you're going to see this again. But I don't think I'll ever see that level of accessibility. Was just crazy. Like, like you go into rooms and there's like all these like rappers and stuff, and they're all like just joking around, and, you end up talking to some of them, or like I talked to the guy, the author of, what was it? Tiny Habits. Yeah. And he was like blowing my mind he was like, I'm going to use Clubhouse for teaching a class about, room moderation. But the thing that I've noticed about Clubhouse is like you're learning, and it's like a learner guide model at the same time at scale. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's true. And so he saw the power in like bringing a kind of private group into a room, a structured thing, and then learning how to like moderate, but you're getting feedback loops live from the audience, which is pretty wild when you think about it.
Wild.
It's like talking to customers, but like all of them at the same, and then they're providing input, and you're kind of like teaching, or like they're learning from you, but then you're learning back. Like it's like co-creation. That's pretty wild. I was like, whoa, like that's pretty crazy stuff.
It was so wild. I also appreciated being able to drop into communities that I don't really have access to, just like cultural divides.
Yeah.
Like hop in and just listen and be like, oh my God, that's such a good point. I never thought about that. Or, just like a little peek in, just like quietly sit like a little mouse in the corner listening. And
I think it's like you said, the whole like, there's these invisible borders that we kind of buy into these stories that you can't go into this room or what. I mean, it's an app that like, it's clearly everyone can go anywhere, but I noticed like, no one's going into, I would go into the new Nigerian rooms. Like I just joined the club and I was like, what if they like don't accept me? But I was like, who cares?
Who cares? I'm sitting on the couch during a pandemic. Fuck
what are they going to do? Like, and then I found like, I would go into those rooms and they were I would learn so much. Like I went into this one and it was, there were new Nigerians and they were talking about crypto. So I was interested to hear what they had to say.
Yeah.
And they, the moderators didn't have a very good handle on the subject matter. So the room started getting like kind of rowdy. And then I started talking and then they kind of were like, one guy says, oh, you kind of, I think you know what you're talking about. You want to be a moderator? So I like ended up moderating this new Nigerian crypto. I was like, this is so crazy. Like, where would this ever happen? And I was talking to literally like all these Nigerians and they were telling me all kinds of like, I mean, it was like a researcher's paradise. Like, oh my God, like you're getting firsthand like pain points and all this stuff just sitting there talking, so easy to access.
Yeah. And you could just bounce out so easily. Like, we started seeing people who they'd get invited onto the stage and then be like, okay, here's my pitch. Here's who I am. This is all about me. And you could just bounce or, like some norms. Some communities had really strict norms. Others, it was like a horrendous free for all, like, this is the worst. But, all the humanness. Corey, can I ask you a question? Cause I'm curious with the Web3 stuff. Like, so there are two, like I said, I'm a part of a bunch of things, but two communities that I lead. So one of them is a small-ish membership group that I run for co-working space operators called The Lab. It's a marketing club. The other one is a monthly virtual event series for operators. That one's bigger. We've had like 5,000 operators show up over the last few years. I'm curious. I'm like, should I push into Web3 and do something? I'm not so much interested in the crypto aspect, like the payment thing I kind of have figured out. But I'm curious, like, is there something we could do to like introduce people to it? Like the thing I thought, like, is it a coin? Is it like get this badge? Like, what are the possibilities? Cause I don't want to be, left in the dark, but I'm also not like full tilt boogie right now.
Yeah, I know. That's sort of what I'm going to be teaching this course called Human Marketing. And a lot of it was designed because of like this problem that people, even in crypto, it's really difficult to know, like, should I do, a token or, all this stuff. And I mean, really, to me, it's more about having mental models and thinking, because I think you first have to get the community to think in terms of Web3. And that means understanding their story and what's important to them and kind of aligning it with your goals of, your organizational goals and all that.
Yeah.
And just I think the best things are like KPI, like reward things that are like, it's easy to do NFTs. Yeah. I would actually just kind of concentrate on that because the NFTs can be almost like literally anything. You don't have to have some like elaborate artwork or whatever. Like you can just start there as a test and just say like, we're kind of testing this out or whatever, however you want to say it, and use that as a reward system. And that's sort of like an access, like you could say, like, if you have like this type of NFT, you'll be at this tier of our, VIP level. Like if you're into the, I don't know how you structure.
I'm open to it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Corey, I love this.
Yeah.
Are you by chance recording? I'm like, why is this not a podcast?
Thanks for listening to Co-working Out Loud. I hope this episode gave you some things to think about. And if you have more questions than answers, that is probably a good thing. And you're right where you need to be. We're still all figuring this out in a big way. If you haven't already, head over to katjohnson.co to find out all about the next Co-working Convo, membership in our lab marketing club, read blog posts about co-working content community, and I'll see you next time.